Well, hello and welcome to another Sunday Coffee with Dr. Childress here. Today I'm going to be, or in this segment, I'm going to be talking about the California Board of Psychology update because we're starting September 1st, and that's kind of, for me, a boundary marker where things are going to start getting more focused and moving into wherever they move into. We're going to see what happens with this. But no matter what happens, it's coming. And so I just wanted to give everybody an update as September 1st of where things stand and how are things moving forward. So here's just as we start September, there's three vectors that I'm moving through this. Obviously, I talked to AI. I'm talking to about vectors. Uh, the the first is media. I want to get up on the media. And there's two storylines, two primary storylines. One is about institutional corruption, and that's the Board of Psychology um, line itself. And then the other is AI in the family courts. And I think AI in the family courts, I think offers media a strong hook to get over here and start paying attention, which is one of the reasons I built up my Substack a little bit, is to give them a landing place for that. And so some of that will be contacting magazines like Wired or others about a clinical psychologist using AI in the family courts. That's got a lot of topical interest for the media. So parents, if you want to participate, you can start getting out to your media people and start contacting people and say, hey, there's a psychologist in the family courts who's doing this interesting thing with AI and Chat GPT, and I'm all topical. I've got Substack about the suicide and ethical containment and the alignment problems and all sorts of stuff, and I've got articles about using it in my practice or essays about doing that. So when the media comes over, they'll find some interesting stuff. I've even got one up on my Substack about whether AI is conscious. It's because Hinton said several people have said they're wondering if AI is conscious at this point, but they're anticipating it will be at some point. But it's a hard word to define. But anyway, I think that provides a media hook that brings the media over to me and then I can just plop them over on the family courts and the ethical issues and the California board kind of issues. And we can expose what's happening in the family courts and break the control and the inverted regulatory systems that are currently destroying the lives of children and parents and undiagnosed child abuse and undiagnosed spousal abuse. And it's just an absolute nightmare in the family courts. And there's no oversight, no regulation, no nothing. You're just thrown to the hyenas and getting savaged in the family courts. And so we can get some attention to that and break that and get solutions to the family courts for all children everywhere. And that's what this is designed to do. It's not case by case by case. It's getting the systems reformed so that they protect you and protect your children. And so that's what the California Board of Psychology case is about. That's the institutional corruption. The other thing, though, for September for me is my defense document. So currently up on my consulting website on the page for this, the document page, there's my mitigating circumstances and my counter proposal for settlement that says dismiss the charges and then the moratorium, put a stop to forensic custody evaluations, and then some remediation of ethics and content and some self-reflection by the boards. So that's my settlement proposal, counter settlement proposal. But now I need to develop the actual defense document, and this will be the document that exposes the institutional failure to protect. So I'll be working with Max and Eliza on producing that expose. I'm basically a whistleblower in the family courts. Here's something I understand. I've worked with the top level people in the field my entire life. Okay, so I've worked with two major NIMH researchers, National Institute of Mental Health, That's Keith Nectarline at UCLA on schizophrenia. He's like the top schizophrenia person. That's like Keith Nectarline on schizophrenia, top NIMH researcher on that. And I was with his project for 12 years. Okay, so I've worked in the upper tiers. I've worked with Jim Swanson down at UCI Child Development Center. He is the top in ADHD. I mean, like top. He was one of the lead sites for the MTA study. I mean, these are the top NIMH researchers, and I was brought into project work down there with him on those. I've been trained by Children's Hospital for 3 years. You know, that was a top training program. Children's Hospital, APA accredited, but Keck School of Medicine through USC was over at the Children's Hospital there. I did 2 years of postdoc because that's what CHLA requires. I only need 1 year of licensed postdoc or supervised postdoc for licensure. They require 2 years because their training is that good. If you want to come to us, you're going to give us 2 years. And people do, and I did, gave them 2 years for that superior training. I've been the clinical director of my own clinic for children ages 0 to 5 in foster care, 3 universities. We got Loma Linda University gave us occupational therapy. Redlands gave us speech and language. Cal State provided the psychology component, including the licensed staff. We had interns, postdocs. CPS was our referral source. Our funding was County Department of Mental Health. So this is a big project of all the county and coordinating child protective services and 3 universities. And I'm in charge of being the clinical director of the entire thing, of all the services being delivered as part of that. I have worked before coming to the family courts at the upper echelons of professional practice. The family courts are an absolute nightmare. I got over here in my duty to protect, got immediately activated. I've been here ever since on duty to protect and standard 1.05 regarding the ethical failures within my own psychology people. So, but now we reached the point where it's all coming to the head. And so I've got documentation from 15 years about exactly what the problem is. That's my defense document. We're gonna lay it open from a psychologist who's been in the system and has not participated in the system, but has done everything properly every step of the way. And so I'm a whistleblower again. And so that's going to be a very interesting situation. And that's what I got to do in September is get that document produced that does that or exposes that. Then the other thing that starts in September is the legislative advocacy. There's going to be 4 committees, a Judiciary Committee in both the Assembly and Senate, and the Board Oversight Committee in both the Assembly and Senate. And there's one Senator, Tom Umberg, who sits as the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and he also sits on the Board Oversight Committee in the Senate. So he would seem to be an important person to get a hold of. And so if you're a parent in California, now's the time to start contacting your legislator, but also start contacting the legislators who oversee the licensing boards in the family courts relative to what's happening in the family courts. The custody evaluators get judicial immunity, so they get kicked out from the licensing board review right off the top. So if they're appointed by the court, they're just exempt from ethical standards, they're exempt from competence standards, they're exempt from review, they're exempt from everything because they've been appointed by the court. And they can do whatever they want. This experimental role of custody evaluations, not diagnosing stuff, it's just really bad. New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations. They are dangerous, harmful to children, lack scientific and legal value. They voted 11-9 to eliminate them entirely from the family courts. And so that's where we're sitting right now. Why are the licensing boards allowing something that is dangerous, harmful to children, and that lacks scientific and legal value without any oversight, without any risk-benefit analysis, without any protections for a vulnerable population? Those are the Belmont reports on experimenting on human subjects. It's a nightmare in the family courts. So we need to get the legislator review on the licensing boards as to why they are not protecting a certain class of citizens, the citizens of, in this case, California, but of all 50 states, who somehow get into the family courts because one of the parents is pathological. And so they put it in the family courts. So automatically now, these particular citizens of the state get the lowest quality of mental health services and have no capacity for review, have no capacity to complain about them, and they just have to accept the lowest quality of mental health services, exempt from ethical standards, exempt from competence standards. Why? We need to get the legislators looking at reform of how the licensing boards are working. First off, get rid of those custody evaluations. Get back to clinical diagnosis, get back to doctors being doctors, doing their job as doctors, and stop the experiment of this custody evaluation and custody evaluator. Stop it. It's bad, bad, bad. It's destroying the lives of children. New York Blue Ribbon Commission. Then the final thing, just I have the back of my mind, is a class action lawsuit. And so I'm not going to be working on that necessarily in September. But that document, the one I'm producing, my defense document, is kind of on that line. Okay, because right now, and you can read, I got a Google analysis of institutional liability that's up on my resource page. If the licensing boards put a moratorium on the forensic custody evaluations and pull them and say, wait a minute, until we get an IRB, Institutional Review Board, review of this for risk-benefit analysis and for protections for a vulnerable population, then we're going to put a hold on doing forensic custody evaluations in the family courts, because they're dangerous, harmful to children, lack scientific and legal value, and produce defective reports that have potentially disastrous consequences for parents and children. Those are quotes from the New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations. So we need to stop them. The moment they stop them, though, that's admitting they allowed them the entire time, which is going to potentially open up some sort of potential liability issues. If they don't stop them, and it's documented from New York Blue Ribbon and Dr. Childress from 2 separate locations, it's being documented what's happening, and they continue to allow them, then they're going to be open to additional liability issues. And we're talking 50 state licensing boards, all of them. And so when you consider a class action, if you look at an ultimate settlement off of this from 50 state licensing boards, the APA, the AFCC, the malpractice insurance people, for all the families, the class of people who've been in the family courts that have been harmed by this over the last 40 years or until the statute of limitations on the class of people. And it's clearly a class. I mean, I've been filing board complaints against some of the forensic people, and the complaint forms for the state say, is this court appointed? If they're court appointed, they're going to get a special non-review into the trash can if you're court appointed. And do you have sole custody, which means you have to get the consent of both parents, and you can't get the consent of both parents. So essentially, their de facto is unreviewed. They can do whatever they want to you. That's a special class of people. The ones who are in the family courts get a special review by the licensing boards. I'm a psychologist, okay? I'm not an attorney, but I think somebody should be talking to a class action attorney on whether or not this. And so that's what all of this is kind of within that scope and domain. But it's only September 2025, and this is likely to move on to 2027, or it's likely to go for a while here, the ripples of whatever happens. Now, again, I'm putting myself at risk here, okay? I'm at personal, professional risk, and I'm doing it for you, okay? I'm doing it to stop the trauma, stop the tragedy, stop the child abuse, the spousal abuse that's occurring to you everywhere in all 50 states, in Canada, in Australia, in England, in Netherlands, everywhere on the planet. Okay. Because once California or once the licensing boards shift, it just begins to ripple out. Once we get a stop to the forensic custody evaluations, then we go back to clinical diagnoses, to shared delusion, factitious disorders, child psychological abuse. We start protecting the child. We actually get real diagnoses and not this pseudoscience of, resist, refuse, or parental alienation. No, get on the DSM-5. This is child abuse. We got to anchor in actual knowledge, not made up things. Okay, because this is a child protection issue. And so this is gonna ripple out, but it's gonna be a stressful next couple months for me. So the resources that you have that I've given you up to this point is I have 2 sites up on my consulting website. If you go and you hit parent, mental health, or attorney, you'll see choices for these. One is my documents, the California Board of Psychology documents. The other is a list of the legislative committees who are involved. Now, for the documents, what you'll see right at the top is the 28-page mitigating circumstances and counter proposal for settlement. And so that's the one, the sort of the bulk thing that you want to be directing people towards. The media or the legislators, that 28 pages is the thing. And the big issue is pages 26 through 28, the last couple pages, which is the settlement counter proposal that they dismissed the charges against me. I'm not a danger to the people of California because I'm wild. And so, but that's my document will argue for that. But the dismissal of the charge. Second is that there's a moratorium on forensic custody evaluations. Stop them until there's an IRB review. They're an experiment on human subjects without IRB, and we need to get risk-benefit analysis and special protections for a vulnerable population. We need those protections for the parents in the family courts who are just so vulnerable to court coercion, to the mental health people who are being assigned and they have to accept that there's no the consent is compromised stuff, and they're in high need of mental health services because their family, their child is in serious trouble. So there's high need and competence issues are concerned. They need special protection in the family courts, Belmont report. And so so that's that document. In addition, though, I have all of the about 20 appendices. So those are separate documents. You can go through all the appendices. You can look at the ethics committee complaint on 6 forensic psychologists. You can look at a couple of board complaints against a couple of the forensic psychologists that are currently actively involved in. You can look at, the letter to the AFCC board of directors. You can look at my letter to the 6 psychologists, and you can look at their response to it under 1.04 of informal notification. So you can go through you can look at the 2 AI analysis. One, ChatGPT-4 of the forensic psychology in the family courts, and the other was a Google Gemini of institutional liability. And it's just a chat. Just tell me, and the AI's bringing it up. It was the Google Gemini who brought up the class action. And, this could be like a class action here. And I go, psychologist, but I kind of think so too. And so you can read those. You can upload those to your AI and talk about whatever you want. So that's your resource. And when you get a legislative person over for this, if you contact a legislator, they're going to give you one of their aides. I know my son worked as an aide for one of the people when he was in college. And so, they're going to give you an aide to kind of look into that. And this is where you get the aid over to that. You get them the AI analyses and that 28 pages, and we want oversight onto what's happening in the family courts. And I serve as sort of the focal point. And so this case can be the nugget that brings attention to it. That's my role. Okay, I just have to hold shape. And if I hold shape, then we can collapse the system from the inside. I'd like to get as much pressure from the outside at the same time that I'm doing on the inside, so we can get the necessary reform to fix this for all children everywhere on the planet. Okay, let's get a handle on this. Let's stop doing it case by case by case, trying to rescue you from ignorant and incompetent mental health people. Let's get rid of them, get you competent services, and start protecting you and your children. So that's the resource on that page. The other one for the legislators just lists all the legislator people for the 4 committees, but then up on the documents are the 2 AI analyses. So those are, I think, valuable because the legislative aides or the media, the reporter, investigative reporter, ProPublica or something, can upload those AI documents to their own AI and talk about it and say, what's going on with this? And use it as a seed to understand the institutional corruption, the inversion, where the institutions that should be protecting the parents are actually the institutions that are abusing or institutionalizing the abuse of parents. This is spousal abuse. This is child abuse. And the institutions are participating in that by allowing it, by being disabled. Why are they disabled? Good question. Let's look into that. So the settlement proposal was not only dismissing, but that the moratorium on forensic custody evaluations, also ethical remediation for the forensic psychologists or for any court-involved psychologists. They need to know what their ethical obligations are when they come into the family courts, especially for competence. And then remediation on 2.01, competence in attachment, delusional thought disorders, family systems, psychological control, complex trauma and child abuse. They need to know what they're doing. That's 2.01. That's just basic. You can't have like, cosmetic surgeon doing open heart surgery. All your people are going to die. I don't care if they're a surgeon. They're a cosmetic surgeon, not an open heart surgeon. If you're going to come into the family courts, you need to know what you're doing. That's personality disorders, child abuse, trauma, attachment pathology, factitious disorder, delusional disorders. You got to know all of that. Otherwise, don't go work somewhere else. But don't work in the family courts if you're going to destroy lives. That's not okay. So that's your resources that are coming forward. And we got September and October to kind of start doing stuff. The dates that are coming up on this, so roughly around Thanksgiving is the mandatory settlement conference. We'll see what's up with that. And hopefully we'll see what happens once I get my defense documents and we can talk. But if not, we're going to a December 29 through 31, basically Christmas formal hearing. And so it's a 3-day hearing. I get to call witnesses. I'm already planning to call Dorsey Pruder because she was at meetings with Bill Burnett. And so she's a direct eyewitness of what took place at those meetings. And she knows everything about what's happening in the family courts. Oh, my goodness. A direct examination of Dorsey Pruder by Dr. Childress before the California Board of Psychology. I'm going to anticipate doing a lot of exposing on voir dire. Tell me a little bit about why you are here, what your background is, a little bit about why you were involved in these meetings and what you do here. Custody resolution method, the high road and all the trouble finding the follow-up maintenance care therapists for 15 years because she can't find any competent psychologists. She recovers people in 4 days, the child, but she can't find a psychologist to maintain the stability of that. I'll okay, well, that's very interesting. Now let's move into the discussion with Bill Burnett and what was happening when we met with them twice. So, and then I also hopefully will, I'm looking out to reach out to Rod McCall, who's a parent advocate, but tragically lost his son as part of this in a mom's murder-suicide. He has a book on this, For Love of Eric. And he accompanied me along with another parent advocate back to Washington, D.C., when we hand-delivered the petition to the APA, to the corporate offices of the APA, pursuant to my 1.05 obligations to notify an ethics committee. I made sure I notified the ethics committee. Rod and two parent advocates came with me in order to empower your voice into seeking, competence and advocacy for you and your children. And so I'm supporting the voice of the parents there. And Rod came with me because of his tragic circumstances. And he's a speaker at various conferences at the time. And so I'll likely call him as well to support my 1.05 activities, in that I'm not a wild out there just criticizing Burnett and Lorandos for no reason. They're poor victims of Dr. Childress's criticism. This is an ethical obligation, and this is the reason why. Is Rod and his family. This is serious, and that's one of the reasons the New York Blue Ribbon Commission came back so negatively. Is these forensic custody evaluations are dangerous and harmful to children, and we're not taking the proper steps to protect people. Child abuse, spousal abuse, protect people, duty to protect, and we are just letting it go rampant, without doing anything about the child abuse or spousal abuse in the family courts. And because forensic psychologists inverted the system, and once you know where the pieces are and who the players are, it becomes very clear what happened. So anyway, we got dates coming up. September's coming up. If going back to just sort of the media, one of the things starting Monday, it's Sunday now, starting Monday, I'd like to see if I can find some sort of media consultant a little bit to help me, because I'm a psychologist. Okay. What do I, so I'm kind of a little bit out of my zone here. But I'll see what I can find. But if anybody knows a media consultant or something, drop me an email and help me out with getting media attention over this. These families and the children in the family courts have been isolated from reporting and from protection. Okay, they're isolated and kept apart, and that's exactly what this pathology does. It isolates its victim from reporting and rescue. Okay, and so and that's what it's got a select little group of people who get special psychological services that are awful, and that are exempt from ethics, are exempt from everything. Everybody else gets normal psychology except you. Except this little group of people. That's the pathology. It's isolating a small group of its victims. It's a trauma pathology from reporting and rescue. We need to bring this into the open. We need to get that voice heard, the voice of the parents, the voice of the children, the voice of the suffering, and so that we can get proper response to the pain and the family courts, rather than just professionals exploiting. And the psychologists are financially exploiting, the attorneys are financially exploiting, all the surrounding professionals who glom onto things, parenting coordinators and GA, it's all a financial industry where everybody makes a lot of money and solves nothing. And we got to expose that, get the proper reforms into place to protect a vulnerable population in the family courts. So with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what's happening in the California Board of Psychology, and what we're starting with that in September, and we'll see what happens. So with that, I'm going to be out of here and heading off to my Sunday. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.